391 Same bed. The Wang family's second son was stunned. If his father insisted, there was really nothing he could do. After all, he couldn't really report him. Otherwise, his reputation would be ruined as well. That wouldn't do. The Wang family's second son looked at his wife anxiously and asked, "Then what should we do?" Jiang Mo was silent for a few minutes before the corners of her lips curled up into a scheming smile. "We'll come over before dawn tomorrow morning. We won't sell the flour, but they still have to fork out the money." The Wang family's second son was a little confused. They weren't fools, so why would they give them free money? Xiaosheng and Yu Bing didn't sleep after entering the room. After discussing tomorrow's matters and waiting for the door to be completely locked, they lay down in peace. During the silent night, without other distractions, the two of them finally felt a trace of nervousness. Yu Bing was a little uneasy. After all, in her 2 lifetimes, she had never slept in the same bed with a man. Yu Bing thought that she would be so nervous that she wouldn't be able to sleep tonight, but she didn't expect to fall asleep not long after she lay down. Yu Bing was on the inner side of the bed, while Xiaosheng was on the outer side. After the two of them lay down, he didn't dare to move or kept reciting the text he had read in his mind until he heard the even breathing beside him. When Xiaosheng turned his head carefully, he accidentally saw the fair and delicate skin on Yu Bing's waist. Perhaps because the tank top was a little loose, the hem of the shirt had reached her waist. With just a glance, Xiaosheng felt his throat go dry. He swallowed hard and quickly pulled down the corner of his shirt to cover Yu Bing's bare waist. He then covered Yu Bing's stomach with a thin blanket to prevent her from catching a cold. The window of the room was made of see-through paper and there was a hint of light, so it wasn't pitch black in the room. Yu Bing's facial features were a little blurry in the darkness. Xiaosheng held his breath and moved closer to Yu Bing. Then, he saw Yu Bing, whose hair was loose, clearly. She had a smooth forehead, a small nose, and her rosy lips were slightly parted. Xiaosheng smiled as he looked at Yu Bing. The more he looked at her, the cuter he found her. However, his breathing couldn't help but become heavy. Xiaosheng hurriedly turned around and turned his body to face the outside. Then, he took a deep breath. If he continued to look, he was afraid that his nose would bleed again tonight. Xiaosheng focused his attention on the courtyard absent-mindedly. The occasional rustling of the leaves caused by the wind made his wildly beating heart slowly calm down. He originally thought that with the person he loved beside him, he wouldn't be able to fall asleep, but when he heard the rustling outside the window, he fell asleep in a daze. When the morning sun shone on Yu Bing and Xiaosheng's faces, the two of them opened their eyes at the same time. The moment Xiaosheng opened his eyes, he saw the roof, and Yu Bing saw Xiaosheng's perfect side profile. They both froze for a moment, and it took them a few seconds to realize what had happened yesterday. Xiaosheng turned around and met Yu Bing's gaze. The two of them felt a little awkward, but what made Xiaosheng even more embarrassed was his physiological reaction every morning. Moreover, he felt that he was even more aroused than usual today. While Yu Bing was still unaware, he quickly pulled the thin blanket over her and covered his lower body. Yu Bing was stunned when she saw Xiaosheng's actions. Then, Xiaosheng coughed twice and explained seriously, "I suddenly feel a little cold." It was still summer. How cold could it get? Yu Bing felt that Xiaosheng was acting a little strange today, but she didn't think too much about it. She looked up at the light that seeped through the window paper as she said, "It's getting late. We have to set off quickly to send this batch of goods back first." Xiaosheng tightened his grip on the blanket. "Okay," he replied, but his body didn't move at all. Yu Bing sat up to get off the bed, but Xiaosheng was lying on the outside, so if she wanted to go out, she had to step over him. Thinking of this, Yu Bing blushed. She thought that Xiaosheng was deliberately teasing her, so she said coquettishly, "Get up quickly. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." 392 Unable to defend himself. At this moment, Xiaosheng didn't dare to get up, since he was afraid that Yu Bing would see his physiological reaction and scold him for being a perv. At that time, he would really not be able to explain himself. However, when he saw Yu Bing's embarrassed expression, he didn't dare to say anything else. After thinking for a moment, he sat up with the blanket and glanced elsewhere. "Go past me." Yu Bing frowned when she saw Xiaosheng's strange actions, but when she thought about how she could get out of bed now, she decided not to pursue the matter. When she got out of bed and put on her shoes, she heard a sound behind her. When Yu Bing turned around, she realized that Xiaosheng was lying down again. Moreover, his face was a little flushed. She hurriedly reached out and touched Xiaosheng's forehead. "Are you feeling unwell?" Xiaosheng hurriedly brushed Yu Bing's hand away. If he held her hand for a while longer, he would feel even more uncomfortable. "I'm fine. I'm going to sleep for a while more, so you can go out first." Yu Bing looked at the sweat on her hands and thought of Xiaoxing's resistance to taking medicine, so she said angrily, "You're afraid of taking medicine, so you didn't tell me that you were sick?" Xiaoxing was unable to defend himself, so he said with a conflicted look, "Yu Bing, I'm really fine. I'll be fine after lying down for a few more minutes." Yu Bing narrowed her eyes at the nervous Xiaoxing. She was certain that he was afraid of taking medicine, so she pulled Xiaoxing's arm. "No, I'm bringing you to the hospital now." Unless Xiaoxing was willing to get up himself, Yu Bing couldn't drag him away. Yu Bing saw Xiaoxing looking at her with a troubled expression, but he didn't say anything, so she sized up Xiaoxing quizzically, making him even more nervous. In her previous life, Yu Bing had also heard some dirty jokes from the female bosses around her. Seeing Xiaoxing cover his lower body with the blanket nervously, Yu Bing instantly understood and her face turned red. She hurriedly turned around and said quickly, "Lie down for a while more." Then, she fled. Seeing this, Xiaoxing finally heaved a sigh of relief. After seeing the door close, he lifted the blanket and looked at a certain spot that was still erect. His head ached, so he could only try to divert his attention to serious matters. 10 minutes later, he finally returned to normal. Only then did Xiaoxing slowly get up and get off the bed. When the two of them saw each other in the courtyard, they deliberately averted their gazes to avoid looking at each other. Mr. Wang had already prepared breakfast. Each of them had 2 sweet potatoes and a bowl of millet porridge. When Mr. Wang saw that the two of them had woken up, he smiled and said, "Come and eat." After Xiaoxing sat at the table, he immediately asked with concern, "Mr. Wang, how many pounds did you collect last night?" When Mr. Wang heard this, he replied in embarrassment, "I only collected 780 pounds last night." Mr. Wang recalled that before he set off last night, he had confidently said that he could gather enough, but now, he was still a few hundred kilograms short. The key was that his second son and wife knew. Mr. Wang was so worried that his second son and wife would cause trouble that he didn't sleep well last night. Although it wasn't the amount they had expected, the gains from this trip weren't small. More than 1,000 pounds of flour was enough to last the food factory for a few days, so Yu Bing smiled and said, "It's fine. I'll calculate the money for you first." After breakfast, Yu Bing began to settle the bill for Mr. Wang. The old man's 500 pounds, plus the 780 pounds from last night, made a total of 1,280 pounds of flour. Yesterday, they had already paid for the 1,000 pounds of flour. The price of the additional 220 pounds was 57.2 yuan, plus the labor fee of 7.8 yuan. Yu Bing took out 65 yuan from her bag and handed it to Mr. Wang. To old farmers like them, who had been digging in the soil their entire lives, just these hard work fees would take them a month or 2 to earn. But he earned this in one night. Mr. Wang had earned a total of 137.8 yuan from the flour and hard work fees. Looking at the money in his hand, he was a little excited. His grandson was saved. All they had to do next was wait. They couldn't set off until everyone was at work. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if people saw them. Therefore, the 3 of them moved all the flour to the wheelbarrow first. Mr. Wang still remembered the chestnuts he had promised Yu Bing yesterday, so he brought 2 large handfuls over. Yu Bing used the excuse that they were too heavy to stop Mr. Wang. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 393 Silence Fee. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Xiaoxing washed and dried the clothes he and Yu Bing had worn. After Yu Bing secretly sneaked back to the bedroom, she took out 2 yuan from her bag and placed it on the desk in the bedroom as her and Xiaoxing's accommodation fees, food expenses, and payment for the chestnut. She knew that if she gave it to Mr. Wang directly, he definitely wouldn't accept it. After the singing from the village's radio station stopped, the 3 of them pushed the wheelbarrow out of the door. Mr. Wang still planned to bring them out of the village from the path they had come from yesterday. With a weight of 1,280 pounds, even if there was a tool cart, it would take a lot of effort. Xiaoxing took the initiative to take the wheelbarrow, while Mr. Wang and Yu Bing assisted by the side by covering the flour with the mat that Mr. Wang had made. The few of them had just walked a few meters when they heard enthusiastic calls behind them. "Dad!" Mr. Wang had a bad feeling. When he turned around and saw his second son and wife smiling sinisterly, while he felt guilty, he pretended to be angry as he said, "I want to go to the hospital to visit Shu Jin. Will stop being a hindrance here. Get lost and go to work." Shu Jin was the Wang family's 3rd son's youngest son. Jiang Mo and the Wang family's 2nd son weren't angry at all when they heard his angry shout. Instead, they approached him with a smile. Jiang Mo said intimately, "Dad, we're also worried about Shu Jin, so we want to go visit Shu Jin today." The Wang family's 2nd son echoed with a smile, "That's right. Dad, when did you make so many mats?" "Coincidentally, my family lacks a bed, so I'll take one." With that, he reached for the mat. Xiaoxing quickly grabbed the Wang family's 2nd son's hand and looked at him coldly. The Wang family's second son pulled his hand back in pain. When he saw Xiaoxing's gaze, he was a little frightened. Seeing this, Jiang Mo sneered. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's get straight to the point. We don't want to care if you're relatives of the Wang family, but if you want to take the food away, you have to pay hush money. When Jiang Mo saw such a large amount of flour last night, she was already suspicious. After all, ordinary families didn't need so much flour. Moreover, unless one was from a rich family, who could afford so much flour? Therefore, Jiang Mo's first reaction was that the two people in front of her sold things on the black market. That was a crime, so if she didn't extort some money, it would be a waste. After Jiang Mo laid the cards on the table, Yu Bing smiled and said, "What if we don't?" Jiang Mo replied fiercely, "Then I'll report you to the village chief." Mr. Wang was extremely anxious. He was the one who had messed this up, so he couldn't implicate others. He slapped his second son hard as he glared at him and said angrily, "I'm not asking you to lend me money, but there's no need for you to be so ruthless, right? You want to force me, your mother, and your brother's only descendant to death? The heavens are watching. Aren't you and your wife afraid that your third brother will haunt you at night?" Whether his third brother's ghost came to look for him or not didn't matter. Money was the most important thing now. If he didn't hurry, the two of them would run away. The Wang family's second son sneered. "Dad, stop trying to scare me. Instead of talking nonsense with me, you might as well persuade them to give us the money as soon as possible so that you can leave early. I don't want much. I only want 100 yuan. When Mr. Wang heard his second son extort him so nonchalantly, he felt embarrassed. As he pointed at the Wang family's second son, he was so angry that his fingers trembled and he couldn't even speak properly. Yu Bing was worried that something would happen to Mr. Wang, so she hurriedly went forward and patted Mr. Wang's chest to calm him down. Then, she looked at the couple coldly. "If you want to report us, go ahead. We're not selling them on the black market, so I'm not afraid of you exposing us." She would go along with them and leave them with no way out. Jiang Mo had expected that they wouldn't compromise easily and that they would bargain. She had even thought of the lowest price, but she had never expected that they were unafraid at all. When she heard Yu Bing's denial and saw her fearless attitude, she was a little puzzled. Was she wrong? However, Jiang Mo still refused to give up so easily. Only a fool like her father-in-law would believe in the excuse that they would use the flour for self-consumption. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 394 Troublemaker. When the Wang family's second son heard this, he was a little dumbfounded. Jiang Mo gave the Wang family's second son a look, asking him what to do. Jiang Mo didn't really plan to report them. After all, her father-in-law was also involved. Just like the Wang family's second son, she didn't want to ruin her reputation. Jiang Mo signaled for the Wang family's second son to help her, but the Wang family's second son didn't understand her signal. The two of them exchanged glances for a long time without avail. Yu Bing sneered and suggested to the two of them in a mocking tone, "Why don't you go home first and discuss it?" Jiang Mo was so angry that she glared at the Wang family's second son. Then, she looked at Yu Bing and cleared her throat before saying, "For my father-in-law's sake, if you really think that you can't fork out 100 yuan, it's negotiable. How much can you offer?" When Yu Bing heard this, a smile appeared on her lips, but her eyes were as cold as ice. "We won't pay a single cent. You're Mr. Wang's son and daughter-in-law. If you report us, everyone will suffer together." Jiang Mo was so angry that she laughed. So that was how it was. When Jiang Mo saw Yu Bing's stubborn expression, she began to play tricks. "No wonder you're so calm. You want to use this against us. Let me tell you, we're not afraid. At most, our family will sever ties with my father-in-law." The Wang family's second son was so shocked when he heard this that he pulled Jiang Mo's arm and said in a low voice, "What nonsense are you talking about? How can you say such a thing so casually?" Since ancient times, filial piety had always been important, especially in the vast rural areas that were still deeply affected by traditional views. There were examples of parents severing ties, but if their children dared to take the initiative to mention it, they would be criticized and ostracized by the entire village. Jiang Mo was so angry that she blurted it out rashly. "Things are so lively here. It's not that I want to criticize you, but how can you be so opportunistic?" The person who came was Mr. Wang's sister-in-law, Lin Bai. If there was anyone in the village who couldn't stand the Wang family, it would be Mr. Wang's sister-in-law. She was petty and would hold a grudge over small matters for a long time. When they saw the person who appeared, even the Wang family's second son and his wife felt uneasy. Lin Bai was famous for stirring up trouble in the village. She stirred up trouble wherever she went, as if she wanted to turn the world upside down. The Wang family's second son was afraid of being implicated, so he hurriedly said, "This has nothing to do with us. I wanted to stop my father from doing it." Jiang Mo was also afraid of her eldest aunt, so she nodded repeatedly. She knew that extorting money was impossible now, since her eldest aunt would blow things up and would definitely tell the village chief, "Eldest aunt, we still have work to do. Take your time chatting with my father. We'll leave first." Lin Bai smiled when she heard this and went forward to grab Jiang Mo's hand. "Don't be anxious. The village chief will be here soon." Lin Bai felt a little lazy today and laid at home until her back hurt before getting up. She wanted to bring her grandson out for a walk, but she didn't expect to have such a shocking discovery. This excited her. When Lin Bai thought of the iron pot that her father-in-law had given Mr. Wang when they split up, she was furious and hurriedly asked her grandson to report it to the village chief while she kept an eye on them. None of the people who appeared here today could escape. Yu Bing and Xiaoxing didn't expect to be stopped by someone else halfway, and a trace of panic appeared in their eyes, but they quickly calmed down. The village chief, Mr. Wang, arrived very quickly. Because Lin Bai's grandson deliberately publicized it, they even attracted a group of villagers. Seeing Mr. Wang's family and two outsiders, Mr. Wang asked with a serious expression, "Wang Chong, what's going on?" Although the village chief was younger than Mr. Wang, he was of higher seniority, so Lin Bai and Mr. Wang had to call him fifth uncle. When Mr. Wang heard the village chief call him by name, he panicked. His mouth moved a few times, but he didn't know how to explain. Seeing this, Lin Bai immediately went forward and told him everything she had seen. How could the village chief not know Lin Bai's character? He couldn't be bothered with her, so he glanced at his nephew and said angrily, "Fool. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." 395 popular support. When Yu Bing saw that so many people had been implicated, she knew that she definitely couldn't fool them anymore, so she picked up her certificate and handed it over. "Mr. Wang, this is my identification." After Mr. Wang took the certificate, he looked at Yu Bing suspiciously. "You're the director of a food factory?" Yu Bing stood upright in front of the village chief, Mr. Wang, and stared straight back as she said with a nod, "Our factory needs a lot of flour, but the flour factory doesn't have enough flour at the moment. In order to increase production, we can only buy some more in private. There was excess flour at Mr. Wang's house, so we thought that we might as well ask Mr. Wang to help us collect more. I know that your village's flour production is very high. If you report me, the villagers involved will be arrested together, so why don't we cooperate?" After Xiaoxing finished speaking, he took a few steps forward and smiled at the villagers kindly. "Do you still have any excess flour at home? If you do, our food factory will accept it. You don't have to go out to the black market to trade. It's so dangerous. We're offering you guys direct service now." Everyone just came to watch the commotion, but when they heard this, they couldn't help but whisper. "My eldest son is preparing to get married, but the girl said that she wants a 200 yuan betrothal gift and a sewing machine. These can't be bought without 300 to 500 yuan. We haven't even gathered enough money for the wedding banquet. We were worrying about how to get the money. Who doesn't worry about money? If we can exchange flour for money, it's worth it even if we have to eat coarse grain. Otherwise, if we encounter a headache or fever, we won't even be willing to go to the village's medical center to buy prescribed medicine. The supply companies only offer 0.16 yuan a caddy. I wonder how much they will offer. I won't sell it at this price. Let the village chief report them." Some people were bold enough to ask directly, "How much will you pay per caddy?" Seeing this, Mr. Wang immediately shouted, "What are you shouting for? What do you guys want to do? Are you all trying to get caught?" Xiaoxing ignored the village chief and replied, 0.26 yuan. My family can gather 50 pounds. My family can sell 60 pounds. Upon hearing this price, the villagers who were short of money became excited and emboldened. With people taking the lead, the remaining people naturally began to feel tempted as well. Everyone was afraid of poverty. Although the village's production wasn't bad, they couldn't exchange it for money. Everyone's hearts ached when they sold the food that they had worked hard to plant at such a low price. Some chose to announce the number loudly, while others whispered to each other. "This price is not bad. My family can gather 100 pounds to sell. Although I'm tempted, I'm afraid of getting arrested. The law doesn't punish the masses. We didn't do anything outrageous. How can they arrest the entire village? If they really dare to arrest us all, we'll kill those people from the Commerce Bureau and say that they want to force us to our deaths and won't give us a way out. We'll cry at the entrance of the county government. That's right. In the future, if you don't have money for treatment, go to the cadres' houses. If they won't let us earn any money, they should give us money when we need it." When the village chief heard these words, he was so angry that he turned around and glared at Xiaoxing. "Stop enticing the people in the village to do illegal things." Xiaoxing pursed his lips and restrained the amusement in his eyes. "This is called popular support. Besides, we're not going to the black market to trade. We'll go straight back to the food factory to produce the goods. Don't worry, it's very safe. Seeing that the situation was completely different from what she had imagined, Lin-Bai panicked and shouted at everyone, "What do you guys want to do? You guys actually want to break the law with them? If you guys dare to cover up for them, I'll report you guys. I'll go to the commune to the county. I don't believe they'll turn a blind eye." A woman about the same age as Lin-Bai stood up. "Lin-Bai, stop causing trouble here. Resolve the internal conflicts in your Wang family yourself. If you dare to implicate us, we'll make sure your family can't survive in the village." "That's right. It's your business if your family doesn't sell it, but if you dare to stab us in the back, I'll be the first to punish you." Those who wanted to sell flour all criticized Lin-Bai. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 396 Hope. Seeing this, Lin-Bai's two sons hurriedly went forward and said to their mother in dissatisfaction, "Mom, stop angering everyone. If our family is really ostracized, you can live by yourself." When Lin-Bai saw that everyone was expressing their dissatisfaction with her, she didn't dare to say anything else and stood at the side with her head lowered. Usually, when she caused trouble, it was usually because the two families had a conflict. Now that she was facing so many people, even if her sons didn't say anything, she didn't dare to go against them. After all, she and her two sons still had to live in the village. If she went against the entire village and was ostracized, her sons would really abandon her. Seeing this, Yu Bing and Xiaoxing exchanged looks and smiled. There were no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. As long as everyone's goals and interests were the same, the problem would resolve on its own. Seeing that everyone wanted to sell flour, the village chief became even more anxious. If this matter was exposed, the commoners could avoid being punished by the higher-ups. However, as the village chief, he definitely couldn't avoid punishment for covering up for a crime. Even if he had contributed to the village previously, he would definitely lose his position as the village chief. "I'm warning you, you guys are not allowed to sell it. If you don't listen, bear the consequences." Then, he turned around and said to Mr. Wang, Yu Bing, and Xiaoxing in front of everyone, "Wang Chong, return the flour to whoever sold it to you now. I'll get them to return the money. The two of you, take the money and leave quickly. Pretend that this didn't happen. Otherwise, I'll report you guys." As soon as she said this, the families who had already sold the flour and obtained the money were unwilling to accept. Who was willing to return the money? Yu Bing, who had finally collected more than 1,000 pounds of flour, was naturally unwilling to give up. She said to everyone, "I don't know who owns the flour I collected, but to sell food for money means that they're definitely short of money. Everyone has worked hard for an entire year. Stop talking, do you hear me?" The village chief stopped her anxiously. Xiaoxing immediately stopped the village chief with a smile. "Don't be anxious. If we're wrong, no one will be tempted and there's no need for you to be anxious. If we hit the nail on the head, it's useless even if you're anxious. You can't stop us." The village chief was led astray by Xiaoxing's words. Yu Bing took the opportunity to run to the villagers and continue to goad them. "You also know that when it comes to dividends, you guys can only earn 200 to 300 yuan at most, and worst case scenario, you guys can only earn 100 to 200 yuan. Which family doesn't have people who get headaches and fevers? You guys also need to buy wedding gifts. Our food factory didn't go to any other village, but here instead." A voice sounded from the crowd. "Looks like we can only watch everyone else earn money. Our family doesn't have any excess flour to sell. We don't even have enough to eat. Flour is a staple food after all. My boys are still growing and eat a lot, so I don't dare to sell flour even if I lack money." When Yu Bing heard this, she realized that these dissenters were a threat and that she had to pull them into the same boat. "Our factory also needs a lot of various raw materials. The factory plans to make sweet potato products. Every family plants them, right? Therefore, it's fine if some families don't have flour to sell this time. We can cooperate next time. The food factory also has to constantly develop new products, so there will eventually be a time when what we want is what you guys have." Although she sounded like she was lying, people needed hope. Life was already so tough, so if there was no hope at all, life would be even more difficult. Therefore, when everyone heard this, even if they couldn't cooperate this time, they no longer felt sad. Instead, they gained more trust in Yu Bing. Now that the situation was favorable, as Xiaoxing blocked the village chief, he turned around and said, "Don't worry. We're a legitimate manufacturer and we're not selling what we bought. We can promise everyone again that after we buy them from you guys, we'll take them back and produce them directly. We won't sell them on the black market. Therefore, in a sense, we're not going anything illegal." Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. $3.97 buy it now. The village chief also tried his best to stop them. Everyone, don't listen to their lies. If we want to sell it, we can only sell it to the supply company. Yu Bing immediately challenged the village chief. Villagers, how much does the supply company pay? If you sell it to me now, you won't even have to leave the village's entrance and the price will be even higher. Village chief, don't stop them anymore. I think they have a point. They're not selling it to others at a high price. That's right. Your family doesn't lack money, so you don't understand the pain of being short of money. Xiaoxing also smiled and said, Village chief, please be more understanding of us poor commoners. After Yu Bing found a large rock, she stood up and waved her arms as she said, if you guys sell it now, we'll accept it now and pay you on the spot. We'll get to know each other better over time. Everyone, I wish us a pleasant cooperation. The next time we need to buy other ingredients, we'll look for you guys immediately. What do you guys think? All right. Everyone was completely convinced by Yu Bing and Xiaoxing's words and replied enthusiastically. Yu Bing smiled as she continued to goad them. Then quickly go back and bring the flour you want to sell. I'll wait for everyone here. When everyone heard this, they dispersed and went home to pack flour. Since the villagers had already been settled, Xiaoxing hugged the village chief's shoulder as he continued to brainwash him. The content was nothing more than that the food factory wasn't being opportunistic, so the village chief wouldn't lose his official position. Just as Xiaoxing was about to smoke, the village chief finally relented. In fact, he had no choice but to relent. The villagers had already brought flour over. Yu Bing's side began to enter the acquisition stage. Some enthusiastic villagers who sold large quantities even carried the large scale over. Xiao village was only a small village with 60 to 70 families. More than 2/3 of the families participated in the flour sale this time. Some of them wanted to sell 20 to 30 pounds. Other than Mr. Wang, who sold 500 pounds because he was waiting to save his grandson's life, the rest only weighed 200 pounds at most. In the end, Yu Bing received a total of 4,950 pounds of flour in Xiao village. It was definitely impossible to pull the wheelbarrow, so the village chief lent his bicycle to Xiaoxing and asked him to ride to town to contact the transport truck. Xiaoxing rode the bicycle quickly. 10 minutes later, he found the post office in town and called the office of the transport team. Zhang Chao was afraid of missing the call, so he didn't dare to go back home last night. At this moment, he was still sleeping on the sofa in the office. He was startled when the phone rang. Then, he sat up and shook his head a few times as he rubbed his face hard with his hand. When he sobered up, he immediately strode to the table and picked up the phone. This is Zhang Chao. Xiaoxing's low and magnetic voice sounded. How many do you have now? In this day and age, calls were transferred by people, so the other party could hear the information on the phone at any time and had no privacy, so there were many things that couldn't be said openly. When Zhang Chao heard this, he sat on the table and replied proudly, 550. If not for his connections, he wouldn't have been able to gather this amount in a day. Xiaoxing sneered. Asked him to stop. You can only make up this number. Drive over to the entrance of the Supply and Marketing Club beside the Yanqiao Commune in Shanyang County. When Zhang Chao heard Xiaoxing's words, he held back his retort. After all, there was an operator listening, but he was indignant. He decided to pick Xiaoxing up personally and see how many people he had gathered, so he could laugh at him. After Xiaoxing finished the call, he went to the gathering point to wait for the car. Everyone in the village had already dispersed. The Wang family's second son's family finally sold the flour to Yu Bing for 0.26 yuan. Lin Bai's two sons also participated. After the troublemakers were pulled onto this ship, Yu Bing felt much more at ease. Mr. Wang was still helping at the side, since he wanted to do more work to make up for the trouble he had caused. Little Yu, I'm really sorry. I almost messed things up for you guys. Yu Bing shook her head with a smile. Mr. Wang, if this hadn't happened, who knows how many days it would have taken us to gather this amount. Moreover, we lied to you, so I'd like to apologize to you. When Mr. Wang heard this, he waved his hand repeatedly. If I hadn't met you guys, there's no telling when I would have sold them all. Now, I even got paid by you guys for my hard work. This is all thanks to you guys. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 398 Forgery. The two of them exchanged a few more pleasantries. Seeing that Yu Bing really didn't blame him, Mr. Wang pushed his mat and left. He wanted to go to the supply company to sell the mat. Thinking about how the money in his pocket was enough to treat his grandson, Mr. Wang felt invigorated. At this moment, Zhang Chao was driving a light truck to the Yanqiao Commune. Because it was empty and there was no need to pick people passengers like a bus, the truck drove very quickly and arrived in 2 hours. When Xiaoxing saw the car stop, he walked to the front passenger seat and sat in the driver's seat. Zhang Chao asked impatiently as he drove, "How many pounds did you receive for you to mock me?" When Xiaoxing heard this, he turned around and raised his eyebrows at Zhang Chao as he reported the number with a smile. Oh my God! Zhang Chao didn't expect Xiaoxing to receive so much in quantity even when he went to an unfamiliar place, so he was shocked. When Xiaoxing saw Zhang Chao's dispirited appearance, he was a little worried. Yu Bing was going to sit inside later, so he said in disdain, "Drive carefully." Zhang Chao came back to his senses and focused on driving. He failed to beat him in terms of purchasing quantity, but he couldn't be criticized for his driving skills as well. When the car entered the village, many children ran with the car. When Xiaoxing and Zhang Chao were moving the goods, they even enthusiastically helped carry some light flour bags. After that, Yu Bing took out the candies she had brought and distributed them to the children present. Then, the car left under everyone's gaze. Yu Bing and Xiaoxing originally thought that the return trip would be smooth sailing since the flower collection wasn't smooth sailing. Unexpectedly, when they left the city, they encountered the police checking cars at random times. Zhang Chao took out the transportation document he had prepared and handed it over. The person who checked Zhang Chao's car was a young police officer in his 20s or 30s. After looking at the documents and knowing that it was a compliant transport car, he still didn't let it pass immediately. Instead, he looked at the back of the car and asked, "What goods are in the car?" The police officer would know once he checked it later, so Zhang Chao definitely couldn't lie. "It's just some flour for the food factory." The police officer frowned when he heard this. "Are there employees from the food factory in the car?" After Xiaoxing and Yu Bing exchanged looks, they got out of the car together. Yu Bing walked forward and greeted loudly, "Hello, I'm the director of the food factory, Yu Bing." The police officer looked at Yu Bing suspiciously. "Are you the factory director?" Yu Bing nodded and said fearlessly, "I'm the factory director. Don't underestimate me just because I'm young. I'm responding to the country's call to build a new countryside. Women are just as capable as men, so why can't I be the factory director?" Yu Bing said this to give the other party the impression that she wasn't to be trifled with. As expected, the police officer didn't say anything else when he heard this. Instead, he changed the topic. "Where did you get the flour?" Nowadays, the country is rationing flour, so where do you buy your flour? Yu Bing's mind raced as she thought of an excuse. At this moment, Xiaoxing interrupted, "This is specially approved flour." Zhang Chao hurriedly handed the special approval slip he had just obtained before setting off to the police. The police officer looked at them suspiciously and took the special approval slip. After confirming that there was indeed no problem, he handed it back and waved his hand to let them pass. After the few of them returned to the car, Yu Bing sighed in relief and relaxed a little. After the car drove past the toll station, Yu Bing finally picked up the special approval slip. As she flipped through it carefully, she said in admiration, "Zhang Chao is not bad. This forgery technique is quite realistic." As Yu Bing spoke, she raised her thumb. Zhang Chao was stunned for a moment. He knew that Yu Bing was bold, but he didn't expect her to even think of forging a military approval slip. Xiaoxing said helplessly, "Forgery? To think that you could even think of it. Do you think everyone is as bold as you?" The day before yesterday, after we discussed collecting flour, I entered the city to get a car. I happened to hear from my subordinates that the inspection of cars had become stricter than before, so I specifically asked Zhang Li to get this approval slip. I didn't expect it to really come in handy. At that time, Yu Bing was also anxious that she didn't think of the connection between flour rationing and car inspections. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 399 Double Standards. When Yu Bing thought of how she had used the leader's quote to embolden herself just now, she felt that she was a little childish. If she really encountered martial law-controlled supplies, that little trick of hers would be useless. Those car inspectors would rather kill 1,000 innocent people than let anyone off. Yu Bing touched her nose sheepishly and smiled at Xiaoxing ingratiatingly. "Fortunately, you thought of this point. I didn't even think of it. Not only did we almost lose the goods, but we almost got sent to the police station as well." Xiaoxing patted the top of Yu Bing's head with a smile and his voice was filled with gentleness as he said, "If you can think of everything, why would you still need me?" This was the first time Zhang Chao had heard Xiaoxing speak in such a gentle voice. The hot weather couldn't stop the goosebumps on his arms. Was this still the aloof boss he knew? Zhang Chao turned his head slightly and glanced at the two people sitting beside him from the corner of his eye. When he saw their lovey-dovey gazes as they looked at each other, he shook his head in disdain. "Focus on driving." A low and cold voice sounded from the car. Zhang Chao immediately turned his head. This was double standards. It was as if he should be under the car, not in it. The rest of the journey was very smooth. When they returned to Pingjiang County, they brought the flour that Zhang Chao had bought back to the food factory. Food factory. Xiaoxing unloaded the goods with his men while Yu Bing took the money to report to Wenqin. Before she went on a business trip, she received 1,500 yuan. Shaohe Village and Zhang Chao brought back a total of 5,500 caddies of flour, which cost a total of 1,430 yuan. In addition, she paid 7.8 yuan in labor fees. After deducting the fare, food costs, and transportation fee of 50 yuan, in the end, she only returned 8.2 yuan. Wenqin took the money with a smile. Not bad. There's still some money left. When Yu Bing saw the dark circles under Wenqin's eyes and the haggardness on her face, she asked, "You didn't rest well last night?" When Wenqin looked up and saw the concern in Yu Bing's eyes, she replied gently, "Yes, I haven't been resting well recently." As Yu Bing looked at Wenqin's bulging stomach, she patted her shoulder and said, "Rest well. If you really can't handle it, take leave occasionally. Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to consider the baby in your stomach. Your health is more important." Wenqin nodded with a smile. When Yu Bing heard Director Zhao remind her to get the letter, she was a little puzzled. Last time, things had ended on a bad note, but her family still wrote to her. When Mr. Yu and Duan Mei received the money from Yu Yan, their first reaction was indeed surprise, but then it turned into resentment. When Duan Mei saw the remittance slip that had been sent with the letter, she said unhappily, "Why didn't Yu Yan tell us earlier?" Mr. Yu also looked a little unhappy. "If I had known that she had money, I wouldn't have gone to the factory to borrow money 2 days ago. I'm a small leader after all, so it reflected badly upon me." Duan Mei agreed. "The family's reputation has been ruined because of her. Read this letter." With that, she handed the letter to Yu Pan. Yu Pan took the letter aloofly and began to read it. Yu Yan had only sent money this time, and it wasn't for her. She didn't get any things, so it was impossible for Yu Pan not to feel resentment. Yu Pan read the entire letter indifferently. When Duan Mei heard this, she was so angry that she held her forehead with her hand and said, "It's over. Yu Bing is really going to marry that country bumpkin." Mr. Yu frowned. "She's relying on the fact that she's far away from us and we can't control her." When Yu Wu heard this, his first reaction was that he would have a country bumpkin brother-in-law and he couldn't help but frown. He made up his mind not to let outsiders know about this. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. He was from the city, so he didn't want to have anything to do with rural people. If Yu Bing insisted, he could only pretend that he didn't have this embarrassing sister. At the thought of this, he lowered his head and took another bite of the apple in his hand. When Yu Pan found out about this, she was in a good mood. Her 2 sisters were both in the countryside. One of them married into the countryside and became a villager. Even if the other married an intellectual, her household register was still in the countryside. That meant that among her sisters, she had married the best man. As expected, her life wasn't something they could compare to. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 400 Marriage is the grave of love. Duan Mei was vexed. Our family has raised her for so many years, so we can't let someone marry her for free. Shameless be *tch. It's only been a year since she went, but she already seduced a countryside man into marrying her. Duan Mei was indignant, and Mr. Yu was naturally indignant as well. Xiao Wu's job has been settled now, but we haven't settled his marriage yet. If we can't get Yu Bing's betrothal money, how can we find someone to introduce to Yu Wu? Yu Wu rolled his eyes when he heard his father's words. He didn't want to get married. Once he got married, he would be controlled. For example, his father would be nagged by his mother when he returned at night. He would be nagged even if he forgot to buy the things his mother had instructed him to buy. How awful would his life be if got married? What was that saying? Marriage was the grave of love. He didn't understand love, but he knew that graves didn't mean anything good. Yu Wu said impatiently, "I'm still young. Why should I get married?" When Duan Mei heard this, she nodded at Yu Wu dotingly. "You don't know anything. Only by finding a woman to serve you can we be at ease. Marriage is a big deal. We have to calculate the money first. After we get Yu Bing's betrothal money, we'll help you save more money for another 2 years before we can finally help you hold a glamorous wedding." Mr. Yu nodded in agreement. In reply, Duan Mei asked Yu Pan to scold Yu Bing for being shameless and say that Yu Bing had to obtain her family's permission to marry anyone. Then, they emphasized that Yu Bing couldn't have sex before marriage. Ever since Yu Bing caused trouble the last time she returned, the Yu family's couple knew that Yu Bing might not listen, but they were unwilling to just give up like that. Because of this, Mr. Yu and Duan Mei's attention was completely occupied by Yu Bing's betrothal money. Coupled with their dissatisfaction with Yin Yan's remittance, the two of them didn't mention anything about replying to Yu Yan. Yu Bing read the letter quickly. When she saw the mention that someone in the village had seen her, she knew that Yu Yin was behind it. She sneered and threw the letter into the desk drawer. Then, she dismissed this matter. At Wenqing's house. Why are you back so late? I'm starving. Madame Sun sat at Wenqing's door as she ate melon seeds. After saying that, she turned to look at Sun Hui and shouted with heartache, "My precious grandson, you're back. Were you tired at school today?" Sun Hui shook his head and shared happily, "Grandma, I like to go to school, so I'm not tired at all. I'm very happy." Madame Sun also smiled kindly. "That's good. If Xiao Hui is happy, I'll be happy as well." Wenqing held her son's hand as she unlocked the courtyard door. "I've already sued for divorce. I won't change my mind even if you come to my house to cause trouble." "Who said I'm going to cause trouble? I'm here to see my grandson. I panic every single day I don't see him. I have no choice but to stay at your door every day." When Madame Sun saw the door open, she followed Wenqing and her son in. Wenqing felt even more helpless when she saw Madame Sun like this. In the past, it was easy to deal with her when she threw a tantrum. However, ever since she left the police station 2 days ago, Madame Sun's way of doing things had completely changed. With the excuse that she missed her grandson, she came to her door every day before lunch. At noon, when Wenqing brought her son home for lunch, Madame Sun took the opportunity to follow her in. As soon as the food was served, Madame Sun took a bowl and chopsticks to eat as well. She didn't care if there was a portion for her. In front of her son, Wenqing couldn't snatch her bowl and not let her eat, right? Dinner was the same. After Wenqing went to work and Xiao Hui went to school, Madame Sun went to the door to sit and wait for them to return. However, as long as they were at home, Madame Sun would follow them in. She was certain that Wenqing wouldn't mistreat her in front of the child to avoid traumatizing the child. Madame Sun had not stayed in the police station for 10 days for nothing. After butting heads with Yu Bing twice in a row, she had become smarter. If the hard way didn't work, she would use the soft approach. There was food and drink at Wenqing's place anyway, so she would leave the farming to her son for the time being. If they could get Wenqing back, would they have to worry about not having money to pay for food? Even if she couldn't get Wenqing back, it didn't matter. She still had a backup plan. In the 10 days at the police station, Madame Sun had racked her brains over this matter, and she felt a little smug when she thought of her plan. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much.